So what we're going to be covering in this section is printing without white ink. That would cover like your white shirts, well pretty much any color shirt that doesn't need white ink or an underbase under the graphic itself. You might be asking yourself what we consider a dark shirt and things like that. We will be covering that in the dark shirt white ink printing section. So from here, there are a couple things that you need to know about fabrics and things like this. For our water-based ink systems, it's usually only good for natural type fibers, stuff like cottons, hemp, bamboo, rayons, silks, those type things that are actually absorbent. When it comes to printing like blends and things like that, stuff that has polyester in it, polyester is considered plastic that doesn't allow moisture to actually absorb into it. So that's why it can be an issue with printing those type fabrics. Some other things that you have to worry about when you're printing to garments is the fact that the actual quality of the cotton itself. The tighter the weave of the fabric, the better it's going to print. It's basically the closer you can get it to a sheet of paper, the better. So what that means is basically if you have a really ridged type shirt with a lot of hills and valleys, like with the grain of the fabric, this inkjet printer is only spraying ink down. It's not actually going to touch the shirt or anything like that. So it basically sprays over tops of there, and it sometimes can make the images look a little bit duller. It's basically just the white of the shirt coming through the graphic that makes it seem that way. Okay, so what we're going to do first is I've got a white shirt here. And if you pull a white shirt out of the box and it is really wrinkled, throw it up on your heat press for about 10-15 seconds just to get get it all matted out. But most of the time when they're packaged up pretty well, they're not too wrinkled. Alright, so I'll take my platen off the machine here and I'll flip it around backwards. The way this machine prints is it will flip your graphic upside down. So the top of the graphic will be here and the bottom of the graphic will be here. So that's where I want the collar of my shirt. So I'll remove the platen from the machine and just spin it around backwards. Normally if I was doing a bunch of production, I would have a hooping table that I would do this on separate so my machine could be running at the time that I'm prepping a new shirt. So when we're placing these garments on here, this is what we like to call the lay and pray method. The lay and pray method is basically lay it up here and try to get it straight. There is a little bit more logic involved into it, of course. All right. The lowest part of the collar will always be sitting centered on your neck. It doesn't matter how the shirt's constructed, it's just the way it fits onto your body. So what I'll do is I find the center of the shirt and I will take the collars and spread them out so that way it's nice and even. I will take this off of the edge of the platen. The reason I want this collar off of the edge is if I had it up here, my load lasers that are inside the machine will level to this area and not to the printed area. So that's why I have to have it off of the edge. So I'll square it up and see if it's hitting equal on either side, right up here, and then I'll start with the top. And basically when I'm tucking this in, I'm doing like a curl up motion, so it's not really stretching the shirt. Make sure the tag's not sticking up. And this becomes my anchor. So then I can go down the sides and kind of square the shirt up to make sure that it's even on both sides. Alright? If it's difficult, what you can also do is fold the shirt directly in half, and that way it puts like a little bit of a seam going down the center here. So once I have it squared up, I keep my hands directly across from each other, so that way it's basically I don't pull the shirt or stretch it from where it's already been tucked in. And I do a little bit at a time. I'm not trying to cram it up there, and I just get going across, so that way it just keeps the shirt taut and not stretched. And then I'll go up the sides, also keeping my hands across from each other, and I'm not just going straight up the edge, I'm doing a little bit here, a little bit here, and just going down the edge, just trying to keep that shirt taut. Alright, then I'll take the excess, fold it underneath. If it's a smaller shirt, then I can tuck other things in there. I can even use tape or bungee cords or anything like that that gets the job done. So, once I have all the shirt tucked in, smooth it out, make sure I don't have any wrinkles sticking up. I'll check the corners, so that way they're not poking up, and that's good. Alright, so then I'll take the platen, flip it around backwards, and slide it into the machine. You'll notice on the front, or the back of the platen, it has these two little grooves. Those two little grooves slide in onto the machine and click it into place. So we'll just slide it towards it, slides into place, and let it sit down. One of the things you have to make sure of is these little pins right here on the base of the platen are in their little holes, because if it sits up on top of them, this platen will sit too high and it won't be level, and you'll have registration issues or even just blurry prints. So we'll make sure that it clicks down on there. Alright, so now the next thing we have to do is get the machine prepped and ready in the ready state for printing. So I'll manually push the platen in, just so it's just inside this lip here. Inside this little lip are our gap lasers, and we'll show those during the, you've seen those during the anatomy of the machine. So once I have it manually pushed in just a little bit, I'll come over here and I will hold my up button until it stops. And then when I let go, it self-levels itself down to the proper gap. The next thing I'll do is come over here and hit my load button. Right now it has a red light that's saying it's not in the ready state. So once I hit load, you'll hear beeping. It'll draw the shirt into the machine. Beep a second time, and the light will go green. And now the shirt is in the ready state to print. So now what we're going to do is head over to the computer, imported the design that we want to print onto our white shirt, and print it. So the first thing we'll do is we have to choose the proper cues that we want to print with. We have the black quality and black speed cues. You have your color cues, quality and speed, and also the white cues. The white cues, or the basic difference between these cues, is that the black and color cues actually print with white ink, whereas the white cues don't print with white ink. So of course we want to not print with white ink on a white shirt and let the white of the design come from the shirt itself. So the first thing I'll do is come over here and click on the cue that I want. I'm going to choose the M Series white quality. I'm going to hit the little add design or open, and then I'll choose the design that I want. Today I'm going to do a little frog, so I'll just type in where it is, and I chose this as frog on white, so that way when I save all my logos I try to describe what type of fabric they're going to be printed on. I'll click open, and over here on this side, this is your preview window. It has two separate platens. It will only auto-populate into the first available platen. I do have the ability to duplicate it if I want to do a separate one, and I can also create media where when I import one, it imports both, and that will be covered in the advanced RIP section. So as I notice, I have a little bit of clipping here. That means my design, when I designed it, was a little bit bigger than the platen area. So what I'll do is click on the design, and then I'll change its size. So I can either drag it from the corners, scaling it that way, or I can do it by a particular size, the width, the height, or the percentage of what I want it to be printed. I can also mess with the rotation and the placement. Alright, so as of right now, this design is going to be 1.4 inches down. I'm going to take that down to 2.5 from the collar. Because as I'm looking at this is my platen upside down right here. So with this flipped like this, that would be the orientation of it onto the machine. So this is the first slot that we just loaded that shirt on. So now that I have my logo in the proper placement, I'll come back over here, right click on the design, and either hit print here, or I can hit the print button up here as well. So when I hit print, it's going to sit here and process the job. Once the job is processed, the machine will receive the information and start printing it. So as you notice, the print head is sliding back and forth, dropping ink down as it goes. The settings that I have set up in my RIP is to print bidirectional. Bidirectional printing basically is laying ink down with each pass of the head. If you have it set for unidirectional mode, it will lay ink down and then reset, laying ink down this way. The only reason you would use unidirectional if you were doing really, really small text or an odd-shaped object that the the garment would need to be lower than the gap that's set for bidirectional. And this will also be covered a little bit more in detail in the RIP training as well. So once your shirt has finished printing, you will take the platen off, being very careful not to touch the actual image itself because the ink is really wet when it comes off of here. So we'll pick it up from the bottom, spin it around, and when I take these shirts off, to prevent any of the say sleeve from folding over touching that wet ink, I will do this in a logical manner. I will take it out from the bottom, pull it out from the sides, so that way, when I pick it up, I can spread the shirt out, and that way I can just slide it right onto the heat press. So now what we're going to do is place this garment on the heat press. So what I do is make sure that the collar is off the edge of the back of the heat press, because if we press that in there, it can create a semicircle in the back. It just basically folds it. It goes away once you wash it and stuff, but as a final product to hand to a customer, you don't want a little press line in the back of it. So I make sure that it lays flat. You have a couple different options when using release paper. This right here is a Teflon sheet. It's non-stick, but you will have to clean this off with like a little bit of cleaning fluid, something like Windex or something like that, because little fragments of ink do get to it or stay stuck to it after a while. The next one is release paper. Release paper is a silicone coated paper. We sell it with Coleman & Company, and you'll get a little sample with your starter kit as well. But this is my preferred for white shirts. For dark shirts, I like using parchment paper, regular cookie sheets from your local grocery store. When the ink is sitting on top of the fabric like it does with dark type shirts or white ink printing, it actually will give it a hand. On the white shirts, it has no hand because the ink is actually absorbed into the cotton itself. So what I'll do, I make sure not to slide the paper across the image because it will have a little bit of that wetness stick to the paper and it will transfer it to another section and you'll have little white speckles around the edges of your print. So what I like to do is kind of hold it up and drop it straight down. If it does slide, you can pick it up, flip it over, and then start again. Another little accessory that you can get that we sell with Coleman & Company is embroidery backing. They have rolls of like 25-yard rolls, and it is a 3-ounce or 3.5-ounce cutaway. If you have questions about that, definitely just call into your support line and we can give you a more detailed instruction. But the reason I like using this is for the fact that it takes the scorching away from the shirt. So I'll place this up on, so it'll be shirt, release paper, and then backing. And this prevents the shirt from yellowing or scorching. We'll place it down. The temperatures that we use for white shirt or non-white ink printing is 340 degrees. If your temperature fluctuates a couple degrees, don't worry about it. It won't affect the actual print itself. I have my timer set for 2 minutes flat. All right. The only way I can use 2 minutes flat is if I use the embroidery backing. If I do not use the embroidery backing, I will need to split those up into 1 minute increments to kind of prevent that scorching as well. Meaning I would set it for a minute, let it pop up. I would take my paper, flip it over, and kind of let the vapor out, and then press it for an additional minute. Once the heat press pops up, I will remove my papers, and I have a finished product.
Now I'll check once you get it to this kind of ready status.
Alright, so now that the heat press has popped up, we have a finished product. I will remove my embroidery backing, my release paper, and the shirt is ready to go. The shirt will be warm when it comes off the heat press, so be careful not to burn yourself. Some of the other things that might be out there on the t-shirt forums is the pros and cons of pre-treating non-white ink garments and not pre-treating. So the difference between the two is basically washability. The prints will look amazing if you do pre-treat your shirt, and you would want to go with a lighter hand of pre-treating for those garments. But the washability definitely will not be as high if you do not pre-treat. If you have any questions, definitely just call into our support line.